We're at 12 noon. Hi, everyone. I'm Don Saucier. I'm the Faculty Associate Director of our Teaching and Learning Center, and I'm so excited that you found our way to our professional development series. We're going to start today, as we always do, with a land acknowledgement.
All right, Don, just give me a thumbs up when you see what I want you to see. Okay, excellent. Here we go.
As the first land-grant institution established under the 1862 Morrill Act, we acknowledge that the state of Kansas is, historically, home to many native nations, including the Kaw, Osage, and Pawnee, among others. Furthermore, Kansas is the current home to 4 federally recognized native nations: the Prairie Band Potawatomi, the Kickapoo Tribe of Kansas, the Iowa Tribe of Kansas and Nebraska, and the Sac and Fox Nation Missouri in Kansas and Nebraska.
Many native nations utilize the western plains of Kansas as their hunting grounds, and others, such as the Delaware, were moved through this region during Indian removal efforts to make way for white settlers. It's important to acknowledge this, since the land that serves as the foundation of this institution was, and still is, stolen land.
We remember these truths because K-State's status as a land-grant institution is a story that exists within ongoing settler colonialism and rests on the dispossession of indigenous peoples and nations from their lands. These truths are often invisible to many. The recognition that K-State's history begins and continues through indigenous contexts is essential.
Please remember
These truths,
because we still remember.
Thank you. For those of us joining us for the first time, this is a regular event. We have a professional development series of the Teaching and Learning Center that meets in real time over Zoom on Wednesdays at 12 noon. We finish up about 12:50 to give people time to get to their 1 o'clocks. We also record these events for asynchronous viewing and post them on our webpage. So if you have a colleague who's going to be very interested in today's event, and they will be, you should direct them to our webpage to watch this at their convenience after the event. We also have the opportunity for your own professional development certificates, either as a faculty or staff member or as a graduate teaching assistant. And my colleagues are going to drop that information into the chat. There they go. They've just done that. We also have the opportunity, if you're a faculty member and want to become a fellow of the Teaching and Learning Center, we have opportunities for you to do that too at that same link. So you can check that out. We have events every week. I always announce next week's event before this week's event. Next week, I'm going to be presenting, and I'm going to be presenting on tips for successful lectures. I've gotten some feedback over the years that a lot of stuff we talk about is real good in the small classes, the seminar classes. Well, we can give you some advice in those large classes too, where we're doing a lot of the presentation material just like I'm doing now. So next week, I'm going to talk about tips for successful lectures, but today I am super excited. I'm very excited for this to be our lead-off event of the spring semester. Melissa Glaser, who's an amazing supporter of TLC stuff, an amazing teacher in her own right, is going to be talking about improving work-life harmony through fierce self-compassion and empowered refusal. Melissa, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, everyone, for being here today. I know the first week of classes can be especially busy, and so I absolutely appreciate your time and being here. Thank you so much. Give me just a moment to share my screen, and then we will get started. All right, does everything look good on your all end? Okay, perfect. All right, so topic today, improving work-life harmony through fierce self-compassion and empowered refusal. So these all are 3 terms I have stolen from other people, and we'll discuss them. And that work-life harmony, I can't actually remember who I heard it from, but it was someone who said, it was someone here at K-State who said, I really hate the term work-life balance. It's not a balance, it's an integration, or it's making them in harmony. And I thought, I love that. I'm gonna steal that. So unfortunately, I can't give them credit, but I can at least say it wasn't me. But before we begin, I want to explain what the inspiration was for my talk. So I definitely love the research that of the 2 or 3 people I'm going to talk about today, but this actually comes from my experience with some of my close friends here at K-State who I have seen, including myself, struggle with this work-life harmony. I've seen people ignore relationships, ignore themselves, ignore work, ignore family. It's just really, really tough, and we all do the best that we can, but gosh, some tools to help us out would be really, really useful. So it is with those, I dedicate this to those specific unnamed people that I've had lots of conversations with about how hard it can be to do all of the things. All right, so I do want to start with a story as well, and it may not seem related to my topic yet. How many of you have heard of Tammy Jo Schultz? I've got to skim through and see if anybody, I'm seeing a lot of people shaking no. Okay, awesome, I love that. Whoops. All right, so Tammy Jo Schultz is an amazing person. This is her book. I have not yet read it, but it is on my list. I heard about her recently when I was listening to a Hidden Brain podcast and heard about the story. So she is a military pilot and became a commercial pilot, broke a lot of barriers as a woman in that field, as you can imagine. But one of the things that she is well known for is in 2018, a flight from Dallas to New York, where the left engine was hit. It's unclear whether it exploded, it was missing, it was completely out of commission, and the way that she responded to that. So the way she describes it is it feels like the plane was it was hit by something very hard. There were air pressure issues, oxygen was gone, and it was unlike any other flight she'd had, and this is coming from a military pilot. So there was a lot of chaos in the cabin. There was one passenger in severe distress because they had had blunt trauma to the head due to this, and everyone else was panicking, sending "I love you" messages to their friends and family, thinking I'm not going to live through this. And there are recordings of the conversation between Pilot Schultz and air traffic control, and the level of calm that she has in her voice is amazing. She may as well have been telling air traffic control, when we land, we're going to need some more toilet paper because we're out and this is a problem, instead of saying we have an engine missing. But she was very, very calm. And what happened is she realized that the plane is not crashing, it's descending very rapidly, but there is control here. So she realized the passengers didn't know that. And so she spoke to them and told them what was going on. And then she said these 10 words that completely changed the way that people in the plane felt. "We are not going down. We are going to Philadelphia." And so I love this phrase. I've already applied it to several areas of my life where I think the thing that I want, or the thing that everyone expected that's reasonable, they expected to get on a plane and go to New York, isn't going to happen. Something else is, but we're not going down. It is not terrible. It is not lost. It's just a different direction. So this can be applied in so many ways, big and small. But when we realize the thing that we want is the thing that we can't do, there's some grief there. And I find that thinking of that plane and saying those words, "We're not going down, we're going to Philadelphia," can be really, really helpful. When the other part of this is that when she successfully landed the plane, the person who had blunt trauma to the head due to the injury did not survive, but every single other passenger did. She took some proactive measures to land the plane safely and think about her passengers. But the thing that she's noted and remembered for from people, especially reporters, is what she did after the plane landed. And it's that she went back to the cabin and looked each passenger in the eye and asked them how they were and checked to make sure every person was okay. And she was commonly known for talking to passengers after planes landed, and if there was a delay, being really personable, but she walked back through the cabin. And the story goes that more people and reporters actually commented on how she checked on people rather than the amazing aviation skills that she exhibited to land this plane safely. So a couple takeaways from this story. The one being, with that saying, "We're not going down, we're going to Philadelphia," realizing that if the thing we want to happen isn't happening, what is our new direction? And then the second part being that regardless of our amazing skills and accomplishments, it's really the way that we treat people that ends up having that lasting impact. So if we can keep those things in mind with the choices we make, I think that can be very inspiring. So that is Tammy Jo Schultz. All right. She's a speaker, has a website, lots and lots of information out there. So if you're interested in learning more about her, I encourage you to do that. So today, our goals, we're going to identify our values. That's going to bring in some Brene Brown. And then we're going to define these two terms: fierce self-compassion and empowered refusal. Fierce self-compassion comes from Kristen Neff. And she is a highly regarded researcher. She is currently an associate professor of educational psychology at the University of Texas at Austin, and has done work starting in 2003 on the idea of self-compassion. And at least 5,000 research studies have followed her work. So really, really central role here. Vanessa Patrick is at the University University of Houston, and she is Executive Director of Doctoral Programs, Associate Dean for Research, and Professor of Marketing, and lead faculty of the Executive Women in Leadership program. So two really top scholars to look at and follow and learn more about, and we're really just going to scratch the surface today. So I encourage you to look into more of their work as well. But because I also want to, rather than do a deep dive into the research, I want to give us all the opportunity to really apply our concepts to our own lives and choices. I think interaction is great through teaching and learning. We all already know that that's really important, but also to apply it to our lives immediately. All right, so we're going to begin by identifying our values. So this is Brene Brown. I have the website there and I'll put it in the chat momentarily, but hopefully you can read all those values. There's over 100 values listed here. And I'll tell you the exercise we're going to do. I'm going to ask you to look through this list and pick two, just two. Your top two values. And just like anything else in life, we want to do all of the things or say yes to all of the things. And we look through this list and there might be some we could say, oh, that's not a value of mine. But gosh, we might even say the majority are a value. So it's really thinking, okay, not everything can be a priority. Not everything can be a choice. What are the values that truly define you, that are constant, that influences your choices, your decisions, that are part of who you are? So I'll put the link in the chat in case you want to go to that website as well. But I'm going to give you 2 minutes and I'll tell you when I start the timer. I'll give you 2 minutes to choose just two. And it might be helpful if you jot them down, even if you're someone who's like, I can only narrow it down to 4. Maybe I'll pick 2 later. You'll have a chance. So when you're choosing these values, these are things that define you, that like I said, that influence your choices and are the most important things. These are likely to change over time, and that's perfectly fine. So the two that really, really speak to you, and you can define them however you wish. All right, so I know you probably already started looking. I'm going to start the timer now, and you've got 2 minutes. About 40 seconds remaining, and I should add, if there is a value up here not on your list but comes to mind for you, that's perfectly fine to add your own. Do your best to just choose 2. We've got about 30 seconds left. All right, so briefly, I'm going to, all right, let me get to the next slide here. All right, so with these discussion questions, we don't have to go in order, and we can talk about the ones that are most interesting to you. So take a moment to read through them, and I'll invite you to unmute or type in the chat, whichever works for you. But I would like for everyone to provide a response to at least one question, whichever one stands out to you. So if you want to choose which values that you selected as your top 2, you can, or just why did you choose them? And the why is really the more important part. Or which did you have difficulty ruling out? If you got down to 5 and just couldn't pick 2, and eventually you chose them. What were the ones you had difficulty ruling out? But more importantly, why did you rule them out? What made something more important to you than another? Or thinking about ways you already live by these values, or a way that even though it's your value, you struggle sometimes to prioritize it. And then finally, what's a difficult choice you're in the middle of making right now, or you're going to need to make soon? And how might your values influence your decision, or how might they complicate it? Because even something might align with our values, but probably not 100%. It doesn't happen most of the time. So I want to just invite you all to unmute and share. You can mention the question number that you're talking about if you would like to, and it looks like Dawn wants to start us off.
So I like to be a participator in these. I'm sorry. So the two that I chose were commitment and family. And family, I think, is probably my number one, but I tried to sort of cheat a little on the second one because I saw commitment having a lot of meanings and applications. So a lot of the other words that I was seeing, kind of competing with that, I felt commitment overarchingly took them too. So I don't know what that says about me as a person, but I tried to kind of pick the word that meant the most words.
Like a genie, I wish for more wishes kind of a thing.
Right. And I saw commitment just being a synonym for a lot of the other ones that I was looking for, if you thought about it in a particular way.
That's great. There's not right or wrong answers here. It's all about the thought process behind it. And we have a few more people here than I realized, so we won't get to everybody. But if you want for us for sure to hear, type into the chat and we'll read that out loud. And who would like to share next?
I'll go. Honestly, I'm very similar to Dawn in that I kind of went with terms that when I came across them, they were like umbrellas for bigger things. So like for me, I chose contentment and resilience. And for contentment, like I have like subwords for this, like efficiency, humor, and independence. Like those are all things that contribute to like me being content. And I also view content as being like being okay with what is, and resilience as being okay with what I don't know, as well as kind of encompassing elements of like growth and change. So I think those cast the widest breadth for what my values are.
Awesome. Thank you, Ashley. Yes, it's very helpful to be able to couch things underneath an umbrella to kind of get more in. But it's really useful to say, okay, why am I having trouble deciding between these two values? Because then you might end up with a choice that one choice aligns with one value and one aligns with the other value. And you think, how am I supposed to make this choice? Because I value both of these things, right? So the reason why values can be so useful outside of the decision to just think, okay, in general, what matters to me is when you get to that decision, you can kind of get bogged down by the details or how you feel about it or who's asking you or what the consequences are. But if you think, I know what my core values are before you even come to a decision, you're better prepared to say, okay, I already know what my values are. Which decision is going to align with them most? I want to say yes, but if I do, I'm going to have to give up something, and I'm giving up something I value. I value them both, but this is a higher value, so it's a no. Or, oh, this new thing I'm going to say yes to because it's actually aligning with my values more, and I'm going to have to give up this other thing. So that's one reason why exploring values is so important. One more person, if somebody wants to share of any of the questions. Sarah.
So I had a thought as you were saying that, and as I was thinking about which ones I chose and then how Dawn and Ashley described which ones they chose. So one of the ones I chose was community because it did incorporate a lot of the values that I had. But then I also realized that in choosing one that incorporated a lot of things, it doesn't make it easy to say no because it's like, oh, but that could be community and community is one of my values. How do I say no to that?
Yes, excellent points. And that's why deciding between things is so difficult. And this is one of those classic examples of it's not the destination, it's the journey. So values work is never done. It's something we continually revisit, partly because it changes, but partly because the more we think about it, the more we realize, I thought this one, but actually it is this one. So I want to continue to challenge you to continue to do that values work in your own life throughout time. All right. I'm going to go on to the next point. So let's see. Sorry, I'm operating multiple screens here to make sure that I stay on track and they're not connected like they usually are. All right, so we're next going to move on to the two key terms from the title, fear, self-compassion, and empowered refusal. They definitely overlap with values, so you're going to hear that word come up. But as we discuss these two terms, just mentally take note the connections that you see between the ideas, because they are different, but they are very, very complementary to one another. So after we discuss these two ideas, that's one of my questions is, what are the connections that you're seeing between these ideas? All right. So defining this is Kristen Neff. This is her term. She has a lot of information available out there on a wonderful website, selfcompassion.org. So if you want to jump right into it, that's a great place to start. So what is self-compassion? 3 components that Kristen Neff talks about. So this is not specific to fierce self-compassion. She talks about tender self-compassion and fierce. Tender is that kind when we jumped straight to that kindness. Warmth, friendliness, support, desire to help, being tender. And the difference between self-compassion and compassion is just compassion is the way we treat other people. Self-compassion is the way we treat ourselves. So being kind to others, but also being kind to ourselves. But there are other aspects of self-compassion that complicate it. So there's that common humanity, realizing we all have difficulties, because sometimes when we're going through something difficult, or we make a mistake, or we fail to accomplish something, or we're not at our best, we think, it's just me. We have that imposter syndrome, or I'm alone in this, or I'm the only one who's failing at this. And when we realize everyone has difficulties, not only do we treat others better, we also treat ourselves better, because we realize I'm not the only one making mistakes or still learning here, or dealing with these kinds of feelings or choices. And then there's also mindfulness. If we're not aware of the difficulties we have or acknowledge them, it's really hard to be kind to ourselves about them. So recognizing I struggle with this, or this is hard for me, but keeping in that space of recognizing it instead of moving into judgment and evaluation. I struggle with this, therefore I'm not good. This is hard for me, or I wasn't at my best, therefore I can't get better. So a lot of growth mindset ideas thrown in there too. So this is self-compassion in a nutshell, and it all applies to both fierce and tender. But when it comes to that fierce self-compassion, this is when we move away from just, I'm gonna have that positive self-talk to myself. This is moving to really strength and determination. If we think of compassion, you might think of something like, it was just Martin Luther King Jr. Day the other day, someone like him or other activists and leaders, they have strength, they have determination. They may be forceful in a very peaceful way, but they are strong. They refuse to accept harm or injustice. They might be assertive and have confidence. This is just doing the same thing, except about ourselves. If we are determined to do things that are good for ourselves, if we refuse to accept other people harming us or treating us unfairly, if we know that we have value and strength, we're going to stand up for ourselves the same way that we would stand up for somebody else who's being treated poorly. We won't allow it to happen. So that's where that fierceness comes in. And then this is not part of the definition, but self-compassion is just more than rainbows and butterflies, right? It actually benefits us in a lot of ways. The more we practice this, whether it's that fierce or tender part, this is where a lot of the research after Kristen Neff's initial work came through, that they've done many, many studies on this, and people who have higher self-compassion have these benefits. They have higher emotional intelligence, they have stronger relationships, and that's going to be at work and in personal life, any human relationship. Physical health is better, people sleep better, they actually just are physiologically healthier and overall happier. And people also end up with higher resilience, grit, and effective stress management. And so when we're talking about work-life balance, probably the biggest thing that comes to mind is I have too much going on and it's very stressful, right? And so the more we have this self-compassion, the more it's going to help us to manage our stress effectively. So that's how we can kind of define in a nutshell what fierce self-compassion is that we are strong and expect good treatment, and we refuse to be treated badly, and we stand up and advocate for ourselves. So empowered refusal is Vanessa Patrick. And so this is just one small part of her book. And I know someone asked in the chat for a title. I'll be sure to share that later. But this is just a portion of saying no. So empowered refusal is basically, it's saying no, but it's saying no in a way that we feel good about and we feel strong about. So it's based on us rather than the person asking us. What is the person going to think if I say yes or no? Am I going to impress them by saying yes? Are they going to think highly of me? Are they going to be disappointed in me if they say no? Am I going to stress them out by turning them down and saying, I'm sorry, I can't help you with that? It's, can I do this? Do I want to do this or not? We feel empowered. If we really say no, yes, we really mean it and we want to do it and we're excited and into it. If we really don't want to say no, we can feel really good and strong about that decision instead of feeling guilty or worried about disappointing other people. It's about our experience. So in order to do that, we have to make decisions that are centered on our identity, who we are. And if that choice to say yes or no seems out of line with our identity and the way that we define ourselves, then it's probably a no. And so if we realize that, we can say, I can say no to that because that's not who I am. The thing that you're asking me to do is not who I am, so I can say no. And then it's based on our values and what matters most to us. And that's when it gets into, you might have two choices that you really want to say yes to both things, but you know that you can only choose one. And so that's knowing, okay, I value this at this level, I value this at this level, this is the one I'm going to choose. And so knowing those values is really important. And it can sound things like this, saying, I don't, I never or always, or I will not. Those are really strong statements. If someone asked you, will you do this thing? And you say, I never do this thing. That's really strong, or I always do this thing. But this is where it comes from our own values. It can be something like, I always give myself 5 minutes alone before I start my day. Or I never leave my phone on when I go to sleep. Or I will not do something that harms someone else. So some of those are easier. So when we get into kind of the, well, other people might say yes to that or no to that, those really strong statements. But instead of saying something like, I can't, it suggests to the person who's asking you that you don't have the ability to do it, but it also suggests to you that you don't have the ability. And that's not empowering because that gets at your capability. Now, if it's something like, I can't do 10 pull-ups, I can't, that's okay to say. But if someone asks me, Melissa, can you prepare a presentation for us? I don't want to say I can't if my answer is no. I want to say I will not be able to do that this time. I do not have the time, or I don't provide I don't know, I'm coming up with bad examples here, but, or even saying I'd really like to, but suggest to the other person that you wish that you could, and maybe they're going to ask you again. And so offering those types of phrases, unless you actually mean for them to ask you again, is not really empowered refusal. It's just going to come back again in the future. So kind of along this idea, why do we sometimes say yes when we want to say no? If we're able to answer, if we're able to focus on these, it can help us to feel really empowered when we say no to something that we're choosing not to do. We often underestimate or dismiss the cost to ourselves. It's not going to take me that much time. It's not going to be that difficult. I'm not going to lose that much sleep over it. The things that I have to give up to make that happen aren't that important. We think, I can do that, no big deal. We can also, or instead, overestimate or prioritize the benefit to others. This is going to be really helpful to this other person or to this group or to this entity, so I should do it. How helpful is it honestly going to be? Sometimes we think it's going to be a bigger help than it is, or it is going to be a big help, but we prioritize that more than other things that we ourselves are experiencing. So knowing what the cost is to ourselves or the benefit to others can be really, really helpful there. But empowered refusal, kind of in a nutshell, is just being able to say no and feeling really confident that no aligns with our values and is something that we feel really good about saying no. So one thing that Vanessa Patrick talks about in her work that I found really interesting is that when people say yes to something when people say no to something, and they're choosing, is this going to be a yes? Is this going to be a no? If they want to say no, but they say yes, they initially feel better because they're pleasing the other person, but ultimately they experience more negative emotions and reactions. If the opposite, if people say no and they want to say no, it might be a little difficult, but ultimately they actually feel better. So that's kind of you might feel some difficult, if it's a difficult choice, you're either going to feel difficulty saying no or difficulty living with the yes that you didn't actually want to have. It's kind of a choose your difficulty. So getting through that moment of, I might initially feel bad about saying no, but in the long run, I'm going to feel much better. That's what the research suggests people actually feel, but we avoid that first negative feeling. So sometimes we say yes. All right, so for our discussion questions here, just like before, feel free to answer any of these, maybe define them in your own words. If you want to type in the chat, I just put FSC or ER if you wanted to use those as shortcuts. What connections did you notice? How did they complement one another? And then the real big one, what's an experience in which you have applied these concepts in your own life? Have you been fiercely self-compassionate? Have you acted with empowered refusal? And how did you feel before, during, and after that experience? And you can tell us what the choice or experience was, or you can just talk about using those skills. So same as before, feel free to use the chat, or we can have a discussion. All right, there are some things in the chat, and I may have missed some earlier, so I apologize. I'll go back and mention those. So these might have been from the prior question. So Cindy wrote, in terms of values, family, stability, respect. Harmony balance becomes challenged when we consider self and how that fits with family, stability, and respect. As a woman, I sometimes struggle to consider self, but I've learned I have to prioritize self more to avoid imbalance and instability in all aspects of life. Absolutely. Thank you for sharing that. And actually, this book, Fierce Self-Compassion, the subtitle is How Women Can Harness Kindness to Speak Up, Claim Their Power, and Thrive. So even though the idea of fierce self-compassion is for every human, there are some additional gendered responses to this idea, and that is something that Kristen Neff explores in the book. So thank you for bringing that aspect as well. That can be a part of it. Megan writes, I could not narrow past these three: gratitude, peace, and joy. I see them all as interconnected, and they connect to other words too. I'm working on those things collectively for 2025. I see them as words that intersect both my work life and personal life, which is amazing. If they intersect in both places, then we know it's a really high value. So thank you for sharing that, Megan. Okay, Kristen wrote, I've noticed what Melissa's describing, that being honest with myself about what I need to say can help me feel much better in the long run. And gosh, it is hard. So I almost started this talk by saying, okay, the real way to achieve work-life harmony is deep inner hard work, long-term therapy and discussion and mental health, and it takes decades, and that's true. This is scratching the surface, but this is not take a magic pill or follow a magic plan or just have that right time management tool and it's done. It is the deepest it is some of the deepest, hardest inner work that we can do, is determining our values and living based on our values. So definitely hard work there. Okay. Melissa Harlan writes, fierce self-compassion seems to support empowered response. Absolutely. Timing helps me determine the why, urgency, or if the person is in a season of particular need. So they definitely, those skills, you get better at one, you get better at the other, and they support each other for sure. Dawn writes, I think both relate to each of us taking proactive steps to protect our own interests unapologetically. Yes, I love that word, unapologetically, because we only apologize for something if we feel wrong about it. So if we feel strong, we don't need to apologize. All right. Empowered refusal is a form of, Sydney writes, empowered refusal is a form of fierce self-compassion. Being able to say no and express our boundaries, especially in relation to work-life harmony, is how we can advocate for our well-being. Yes, and if you know Brene Brown and boundaries, absolutely, that's tying in there. So boundaries are really important. I do this, I don't do this, and that really focuses on ourselves. Okay, Dr. Ashief writes, my question will be how to balance between self and community needs and not just family. I will say if I had the answer to that, I would be a millionaire. So I think that's a great question. And that's kind of the ongoing battle, right? Is where does the self come in? Where does the community come in? And our values are going to reflect that and be different for each person. So it's a matter of saying, okay, how can I do the best for myself and for other people? And that may vary. Some cultures are more individualistic and some more community-centered. So we would get different answers to this based on what culture or cultures we've all been a part of. But I love that question. AG writes, I tend to overestimate the benefit to others. Sure, the other person or people appreciated my help, but it wasn't a big deal to them as much as it was a big deal to me to help them. I have been there, absolutely. And if we're in higher ed, we care about helping people and helping people learn, especially our students and our colleagues. But knowing, okay, is it really as big of a deal to them? Or if helping others is your number one value, then it might be a yes for you. So that's perfectly fine. Megan and Danielle, that resonates with both of them. They're saying that concept is resonating, gotten into a cycle of wanting to help others at the expense of considering my own needs. So Again, that's why there's so much focus on the self and values, is that we're not doing something against other people or refusing to ever prioritize other people. It's, am I valuing myself at the level that I can say yes and help this person, and also it works for me. So it's really figuring out the two of them. And I am going to give you some specific questions that you can ask yourself to determine for something that's going to cost you a lot but might really help other people. How do you know if you say yes or no? So I'm going to provide you with that in just a moment. Melissa writes, fear, self-compassion. Oh, I already read that one. Sorry about that. Nope, I didn't. Seems to support empowered response. No, I did read that one. Sorry, I'm mixing up. She writes, we are granted a particular amount of strength each day that can determine our decisions, as our why provides confidence in our decisions. Yes, knowing that why is super important. And I love that you said the amount of strength each day. We all have different capabilities, different days. Doing our best sometimes looks like this level, this level, this level. We can reach that different level on different days. So thank you for that. Is there anyone who wants to unmute or say anything as we move, before we move on to the next idea? All right, well, thank you so much for those thoughtful contributions through the chat. All right, so as I mentioned, I'm going to give you a tool when you have a high benefit or high cost request. So this is where in Vanessa Patrick's book, and I will share the title of that book, she talks about kind of this 4-part grid. If something is low cost to you and it's low benefit to the other person, you may say that's just, it's going to take 5 minutes, but it's not going to help you. I'm going to use that 5 minutes some other way. Or it might be really high cost to you and low benefit to somebody else. That's kind of an easy no. That thing you're asking me to do is going to help you this much and take me 10 hours to do. No, thanks. So it's kind of a grid there. The ones we tend to struggle with the most are ones that are going to cost us a lot of time, a lot of energy, a lot of money. Maybe we have to give up other things in order to say yes, but we also know it's going to be really beneficial to other people. And we think, I want to do this, but can I? Should I? Does this work? Or you're choosing between community or individual or work or family. So these are Vanessa Patrick's questions. So these are questions to ask yourself when facing a tough choice. And I'll share the PowerPoint also with TLC, so they'll be able to post that and you can access these later too. Do I want to do this? Sometimes we forget to even ask, is this something we want? And if we really just sit with that for a minute and say, actually, I don't really want to, sometimes that is a big part of the reason to consider just how you feel about it, if you actually want to do it or not. Then comes the realism. Do I have the time, the energy, and the money at the moment? Unless it's something that can be done later, we really have to consider our current circumstances. Maybe we always think that our future Melissa is going to have more time. Future Melissa will have more energy or more money. What do we have at the moment when we need it? Do we have the time? If we started doing that thing today, or even just next week, do we have the time, the energy, and the money that it requires? Is this aligned with my values and purpose? So if it's not, you may be giving something else up that you're already doing, or maybe a different opportunity is going to come along that really aligns with your values that you'll then have to say no to because you no longer have the time for it. Is this a priority right now? Maybe it's something that has to be done right now, or maybe it's something we really want to do, but the timing is just not right. And so it might be a not right now kind of a no. Ask me in 6 months, I'll do this a year from now, or in 5 years, I'm going to do this. So it doesn't have to be a no forever for a lot of choices. Will this add value to my life? And what will it add? Is it going to add to your happiness? Is it going to benefit you in your career? Is it going to benefit your relationships? There's so many ways it can add value, but knowing and identifying for yourself, what is the value this will add? And if it's harder and harder to identify that, that can help you to discern, maybe I'm not taking into account, I'm overblowing how beneficial this might be if I can't identify clearly how this might add value to my life, both on a day-to-day basis and long-term. Will this be enjoyable and rewarding? No need to make yourself miserable if you're not going to enjoy it whatsoever. And it is honestly a choice. There's enough things that we may not enjoy but aren't a choice. I would choose not to, clean my kitchen if I could magically wave a wand, but that's not really a choice. So it's okay that it's not always enjoyable. But is this optional thing? Is it enjoyable and is it rewarding for you? Here's an important one, and it can be very difficult depending on the circumstances you're in, the asker, the culture that you're in. what the repercussions might be, but it's still an important question to ask. Am I saying yes because I'm scared to say no, or I don't know how to refuse, or maybe a bit of both? Because if we say yes and it's just because we're scared, then we've really got to look into what's happening there and reassess that situation. This reminds me of the Nelson Mandela quote, may your choices be based on your hopes, not your fears. So if we're really making a choice because we're afraid, then we've got to evaluate that and say, why am I afraid? And that's the real root of the issue. Do I need to be afraid? If I do, maybe I need some support from someone to say no, someone to have my back if it really is a situation where I'm afraid of what's going to happen if I say no. But oftentimes we're afraid of saying no, and that's not a strong enough reason to say yes. And it may be harder to do the first few times we say no to something, especially if it's a person in our lives that we've always said yes to. The first time we say no to that person, they may be taken aback. They may say, but you always say yes. So it can be really hard to make that adjustment. And another important question is, what will I have to give up if I say yes to this? Because we all know every single one of us has 24 hours in a day, 7 days a week, and we just have different ways of spending that time. We might have higher or lower demands person to person or day to day or year to year, but we always give up something. Even if we feel like I've got a pretty open schedule right now, what are we using during that open schedule? Are we getting really good sleep? Are we taking care of our bodies or our houses or our relationships? Are we really focused and able to take on extra at work? But if we add something on, we often forget, what exactly am I giving up? So it may even just be something like, that's going to take me an extra 3 hours a week. So where am I going to find that 3 hours? Well, I've kind of been binge watching shows on Netflix, and so I could stop doing that and do this other thing. That's okay. Or well, usually we give up sleep, or we give up time with the people we care about. Do we want to do that? If we're in a position where we say, you know what, that's fine. I've been getting a solid 8 hours every night for a while and I can get down to 7. I'm okay. Maybe we can. But we're always giving up something. And so it's really important to think, what is it that I'm giving up? Because then when we do stop doing that thing, we can stay at the level where we're at now in terms of our stress and time commitment, but we're also avoid resentment. Because if we don't think, even if we think, I watch Netflix 3 hours a week, I can give that up. What if that is our only downtime? What if we are go, go, go? What if that is our one escape from stress and we just want to watch, a 10-year-old version of, Fixer Upper, which is what I'm doing right now. Don't watch that show. The price housing at that point, I'm like, they would cost 1 million times more than that right now. It's super unrealistic in terms of pricing in 2025, but it's super fun to watch them redo a house. So if that's someone's only downtime and you think, but I need that to recharge. Do I need it for anything else? No, but I need to just get my mind off of all these other things is my one thing. If we take on this other thing and we stop doing that, we don't have that downtime. We could become more stressed, resentful, cranky, snapping at people. So always think what you'll have to give up if you say yes to this. So these can be really useful questions to ask yourself. The harder the choice is, the more complex your answers are going to be, but you'll at least be well informed of what you're doing. Before I go on, I want to kind of give a shout out. My mom is actually here. She surprised me and hopped on the Zoom. So this is a nice way of having work-life harmony where a parent can hop on the Zoom. And then I also, this making choice things reminds me of some advice that my dad gave me at one point, which is the harder the decision is, the more likely it is that it doesn't matter which one you choose if you're choosing between two things. Because if you've got these two really, really super high values, you're not going to make a wrong choice. You're going to make a different choice. The problem actually comes is if we just say yes to all of it and we don't make a choice. But if we do this thing or we do this thing, if they're both really good options that align with our values that we care about, that are beneficial to us and that we can handle, it's all going to be okay. It's just going to be different how it affects us. It's the saying yes to everything that causes us issues. And one thing that I know Dawn has said is do less, do it better. Whether that's teaching a class, whether that's deciding here are 2 things I'm going to talk about. I wanted to talk about so many more concepts today. And I thought, nope, I'm not even going to bring in that time management stuff from that book I just read. That's really amazing. We don't have time for it. I need to do less and do it better. So a couple final thoughts, and then I want to have time. We've got about 5 minutes left for some discussion. Keep revisiting your values over time. and ensure your choices align with what you value most. Because the more values work you do, the better you'll get at it, the better you'll be able to say, these are my top two, plus they also change. And when you make those choices, really think about, okay, what are these values and what are the conflicting values that I'm going through? If I choose this, it aligns with this value. If I choose this, it aligns with this value. Maybe I value productivity and I also value peace. Okay, I want to do all the things, but I need to relax as well. Values are often in conflict with one another, and that's what makes decisions hard. Remember, when we say yes, we often underestimate the cost to ourselves and we overestimate the benefit to others. Human nature sometimes leads us to unrealistic heroic tendencies. We want to be the hero, and that's coming from a really good place. We want to help people. We think, I can do all of the things. Remember that when you're saying yes. Am I playing too far into this hero role, or is this something I really can realistically do? Continue to learn about fear, self-compassion, and empowered refusal. We only scratched the surface today. There's so much out there, and I'm not the expert on all of these things, but I think it's a really helpful tool to learn more about. And then perhaps the biggest thing besides applying this to your own life, talk with the others in your department or your unit at K-State about ideas, because there are things systemically that make this really difficult. Whether that's something like tenure and promotion process, or there's low staffing, and so you're teaching 6 classes instead of 4 that are outside of your control. So really, if you're going to say no to things, I recognize it's a lot more complicated than advocating for yourself. There are systemic things university-wide that changes are needed or that you need support. So if you can talk to the one person in your unit or department that you think is going to be most open to you, start there and then continue to talk to other people that are receptive to this. If I had the answer about how to go about that's too tricky. You know your departments well, much better than I do, but I think that talking about that on that level is also important. So just want to throw my email up there if you've got any questions for me. I'm in recruitment and admissions, and I also teach for K-State First, and for arts and sciences in the fall, I teach some orientation courses. But I really appreciate your time here. I'm going to stop the screen share so it's a little easier to see faces, and give you all a chance to just share one takeaway. That I shared a couple with you, but what's a good takeaway for you that you can either put in the chat or unmute and share?
So I'll say, Melissa, that one of the most epiphany moments is the advice you just shared from your dad, saying that if you're struggling between two decisions, there's not a wrong one. That makes perfect sense when you think about it like that, but it never ever occurred to me before. And I think that'll stay with me for a while. I learned a lot of other stuff, but that was the mind blown incident for me today.
Awesome. Thank you for that. I will have to let him know. And I'll have to, again, shout out to my mom. Thanks for being here, Mom. She has been a key person in my life to help me determine my values over and over and over again, and always, an excellent example of compassion, and helped me to develop my sense of self-compassion as well. So thank you, Mom. What other thoughts do you all have? We have, let's see, Sherry or Sherry, I apologize if I'm mispronouncing your name. I liked the do less, but do it better. So Dawn, you get a shout out there with that idea as well. Do less and do it better. Well, what I would love to do, I'd love to do the waterfall technique. So if you've been in TLC before, you probably know this one. So if you are here, I would love for you to type in the chat, and then you don't hit send yet. What is one takeaway that you have? If you want to write more than one, that's perfectly fine. But what is one takeaway today that you feel like is useful to you or you can apply to your life? And thank you so much, Sarah, for sharing the book by Vanessa Patrick in the comments there. And it looks like Manhattan Public Library has a copy, and it's available through Hoopla as well. So take 1 minute, type one takeaway. I'll let you know when a minute is up, and then I'll have you all hit enter at once so that you can read, and I'll read them aloud as well. You can see other people's feedback. Got about 30 seconds left. All right, if you're still typing, feel free to finish that thought. If you're ready, go ahead and hit enter and we'll see those appear in the chat there. And Don or Ashley, could I call upon one of you to read one of those since I've been talking the whole time?
Sure, absolutely. So Melissa said the Nelson Mandela quote, "May your choices be made on your hopes, not your fears." Donna said, "You gave me a lot to think about." I said, "Think about the consequences of your decisions when you're making your decisions realistically for both you and for others." Andrew said, "Recentering these decisions on myself can help me decide what will truly bring me joy instead of just adding more stress to my life." Sarah said, "The list of questions when evaluating a decision says I'm going to post a copy for myself to see regularly." Ashley said, "We aren't going down, we're going to Philly," where she said it's always sunny. Um, Cindy said, "Melissa possesses so much wisdom and has developed into an amazing woman. So proud to know you. Great class management techniques too." John V said, "Revisit your values." And Kristen said, "Work-life harmony."
Thank you for reading those, Don. And thank you, Cindy, for that compliment. So I come from the English department, and Cindy was one of the people who taught me so much about teaching. So thank you for all of the guidance you have provided me, especially as I started when I was back in my grad school days. So thank you for that, Sydney. I remember lots of help that you've given me over the years, so that means a lot. Well, we're at 12:50, so if anyone has a question, feel free to put it in there. And like I said earlier, I will share the PowerPoint with TLC. So those questions that Sarah, you mentioned that you're going to post, those will be available. You can also email me and I'll just send you a copy. If you don't want to look at the website, that's totally fine. Or I'll stick around for a bit after the chat and I can talk to you then. But thank you all so much for coming. I really appreciate you being here today.
Thank you so much, Melissa. You were fantastic. This was a wonderful start out to our spring semester. That's why we've added you lead off. So thank you so much for all of your amazing wisdom. I'll remind everyone that we post these after the event. We'll post the recording of this on our webpage. So if you have anyone else who is looking to benefit from this amazing session, they can do so. I'll also remind you we'll be here next Wednesday and every Wednesday thereafter for the rest of the academic year, 12 noon in real time over Zoom. We'll record those for asynchronous viewing later. Next week, I'll be presenting on tips for successful lectures. We have a post-event survey that we've dropped into the chat that we'd love you to complete for this event. And I'll remind you, we also have professional development certificates and also possibilities for faculty to become fellows at the TLC. So stick around for a second if you need to. Otherwise, thank you so much for being here. Hope you have a great rest of your afternoon, and hopefully we'll see you next Wednesday.